Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished leaders and friends, it is an honor and a privilege to return to Kyiv, my third visit to your beautiful country, and a privilege to be asked to speak to you today. Each time I return, I feel something that is difficult to describe, but it is impossible to ignore. It is a sense of clarity. Clarity about what matters, clarity about what is at stake, and clarity about who is carrying that burden. So let me begin differently today. Not by speaking about Ukraine, but by speaking to you. To those defending this country, to those holding families, communities, and institutions together under extraordinary strain. The world sees you, and the world respects you. I am not here as a politician. I am here as a soldier who understands service, as a humanitarian who has seen the human cost of conflict, and as a friend of Ukraine who believes the world must not grow used to this war or numb to its consequences. Because what is happening here is not simply a war about territory. It is a war about values, about sovereignty, about whether the principles that underpin our shared democracy shall hold meaning. The theme of this forum, as we've heard, asks, darkness or dawn? Is light ahead? And standing here in a country that has endured so much, it would be easy to feel the weight of darkness. But Ukraine has already begun to answer that question, not in speeches, but in action. For more than a decade, since 2014, Ukraine has stood on the front line of a struggle that extends far beyond its borders. And since the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian people have done something extraordinary. You have adapted, you have endured, and you have held the line. Few believed that would be possible, and yet here you are, still standing, still fighting, and still leading. Because this is what leadership looks like in the modern world. Not just strength in arms, but strength in unity. Not just resilience, but innovation under fire. And not just survival, but purpose. Ukraine is now at the forefront of modern warfare, developing some of the most advanced drone capabilities anywhere in the world, adapting faster than larger forces, and proving that agility and determination can counter brute force. That is not just resilience. That is leadership in real time. I've seen what strength looks like in conflict. I saw it during my time serving alongside allies in Afghanistan. Different nations, different backgrounds, but united by a shared mission and a shared responsibility. And what I see here in Ukraine is that same principle. Strength, not just in bravery and capability, but in unity, in trust, and in the willingness of nations to stand together and carry the burden together. That is what strength looks like today. Not isolation, not division, but unity, mutual respect, and the resolve to act. The strength is not measured by how loudly we speak, but by how consistently we stand for the values we hold dear. But we must also be honest about the cost. The human toll of this war is truly staggering. And behind every statistic is a life, a family, and a future changed forever. And beyond the visible losses, there is the invisible cost. The trauma carried by those returning from the front. The psychological strain on families living under constant threat and bombardment. The exhaustion that comes from years of uncertainty and grief. This is not something that ends when the war ends. It is something that must be recognized and supported for years to come. Because war is not only fought on the battlefield, it is fought in the mind, through disinformation, through fatigue, and through the slow erosion of hope. Psychological warfare designed to divide. And there are those on the front lines who know exactly what is at stake, and those at home who are exhausted, and understandably so. And that tension is very real. And yet, Ukraine continues to hold together, and hold together you must. I have seen this nation's resilience firsthand through members of the Invictus community, Ukrainian servicemen and women who have faced unimaginable challenges and continue to lead with strength, dignity, and purpose. For those Ukrainians that by day are keeping the economy and the country going, and by night are under bombardment, your service, your courage, and the dedication to your country is recognized and appreciated more than you will ever know. Now, across the world, many are angry, rightly so. Many are scared, understandably so. And many of us disagree on politics. And most of us will agree that there's a lot to fix to bring us back to the middle. So, when some are striving to dismantle democracy, the many should continue to speak up, to be heard, to be counted, and to be the loudest voice, choosing life and freedom. For we know there can be devastating consequences of silence, delay, and lack of accountability. This year marks 10 years of Ukraine's participation in the Invictus Games, a decade that has shown the world what recovery can look like. And not just physical recovery, but the rebuilding of identity, of confidence, and of hope. And during my visit to Lviv, I saw the work of the Superhuman Center, restoring not only bodies, but lives. And it is proof that even in the darkest moments, humanity has an extraordinary capacity to rebuild. And that same spirit extends beyond the front lines. Across Ukraine, organizations are working tirelessly to meet the needs of civilians affected by this war. And among them, World Central Kitchen has been providing millions of meals to those displaced, to families living under constant threat, and to communities cut off from normal supply chains. Their work is simple in concept, full of risk, and profound in impact. Because in the middle of conflict, a hot meal is not just sustenance. It is survival. It is dignity. It is a reminder that people have not been forgotten. That is what light looks like, even in the darkest places. But even as communities rebuild and support one another, the dangers of war persist. Across fields, towns, and villages, landmines and unexploded ordnance remain, a silent, enduring threat to civilians long after the fighting moves on. Now, organizations like the Halo Trust are doing extraordinary work to clear these remnants of war, turning danger back into possibility. But the scale of this challenge is immense, which means our responsibility does not end when the war ends. It continues in the work of recovery, of rebuilding, and of ensuring that future generations can live without fear beneath their feet. Now, if I may step back for just a moment. There was a time, not so long ago, when many believed that we had reached a kind of historical endpoint, that liberal democracy had prevailed, and that major ideological conflict was behind us. But history has a way of reminding us otherwise. What we are witnessing today is not the end of struggle, but its evolution. And the lesson is clear. Democracy is not inevitable. It is not self-sustaining, and it is not immune to challenge. It must be defended, actively, consistently, and collectively. And that is why Ukraine matters so deeply. Because Ukraine has chosen a path grounded in freedom, in dignity, and democratic values, even in the midst of war. We must be absolutely clear about the nature of this war. This is not an accident, nor a misunderstanding, and nor the inevitable fog of conflict. It is the product of sustained, deliberate policy, planned, executed, and defended at the highest levels. It begins with the violation of the Budapest Memorandum, an agreement under which Ukraine relinquished the world's third largest nuclear arsenal in exchange for binding assurances of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Those assurances were not just broken, they were discarded. And when commitments of that magnitude are violated, the damage does not stop at Ukraine's borders. It strikes at the credibility of every international guarantee, every non-proliferation effort, and every promise made between nations. But the consequences are not only strategic, they are profoundly human. Across occupied territories, there is mounting documented evidence of systemic war crimes. Deliberate attacks on civilians, mass killings, torture, sexual violence, and the forced deportation of entire populations. In places like Bucha and Mariupol, the world has seen what happens when those policies are carried out on the ground. Civilians executed, communities erased, and human dignity stripped away. And nowhere is this more chilling than in the treatment of Ukraine's children. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the unlawful deportation and transfer of children, acts that are not incidental to war, but central to a wider strategy. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian children have been forcibly taken from their homes, many separated from parents who were killed, detained, or simply lost in the chaos, and transported into Russia or Russian-controlled territories. There they are subjected to a system designed to erase who they are, given new identities, new citizenship, placed into Russian families, and cut off from language, culture, and country. Obstacles are deliberately created to prevent their return. Under international law, this forcible transfer of children from one national group to another is not just a war crime. It can constitute an act of genocide when carried out with intent to destroy a people's identity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not collateral damage. This is not the chaos of war spilling over. This is organized, systemic, intentional, and designed to endure long after the fighting stops. President Putin, no nation benefits from the continued loss of life we are witnessing. There is still a moment now to stop this war, to prevent further suffering for Ukrainians and Russians alike, and to choose a different course. Years into this war, with immense losses and limited gains, it is increasingly clear that this path offers no victory, only more loss. The cost continues to rise, with no outcome that justifies the human toll. But while we recognize these realities, we must also recognize something equally important. Ukraine is not standing alone. Across Europe and beyond, there has been extraordinary support. Countries have stepped forward, often at real cost, and that matters. Because solidarity is not just a principle, it is a capability. Europe has stood up in profound ways. And that support has mattered, and Ukraine knows it. The task now is to match endurance with speed, solidarity with scale, and commitment with consistency. What has already been done has proven what is possible, and the scale of this moment demands more. Decisive action, delivered quickly, saves lives. And clarity of commitment shortens wars. The United States has a singular role in this story, not only because of its power, but because when Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons, America was part of the assurance that Ukraine's sovereignty and borders would be respected. This is a moment for American leadership, a moment for America to show that it can honor its international treaty obligations, not out of charity, but out of its own enduring role in global security and strategic stability. Respect. Ukraine has earned the respect of the world. Through its leadership, Ukraine has very much earned the respect of the world. Through its leadership, through its resilience, and through its conduct. And of course, through its innovation. And respect really matters. Because when leaders act without respect for sovereignty, for international law, for human life, well, respect once lost is rarely recovered, and never quickly. And Ukraine has taken the opposite path. And that distinction could not be clearer. As President Zelensky has made clear, we are defending our right to live. So, the question is no longer whether Ukraine will stand. You have already answered that. The question is, will the rest of the world match your resolve? Because one day soon, this war will end. And history will not ask what we said, it will ask what we did. Who acted? Who stepped forward? And who chose courage over caution? Ukraine has already given its answer. Now is the time for the rest of us to give ours. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
While the British tabloids are busy obsessing over the height of his socks or what side of the bed he woke up on, Prince Harry just did something that most world leaders wouldn't dare. He didn't just send a PR-cleansed tweet or a pre-recorded video from a mansion. No. Prince Harry just touched down in the heart of a war zone, unannounced, undeterred, and unapologetic. Today we are diving deep into Prince Harry's historic surprise visit to Kyiv, Ukraine. While the haters are screaming into the void of the internet, Harry is on the ground in a country entering its 5th year of a brutal conflict with Russia. He stood before the Kyiv Security Forum and delivered a speech that wasn't just royal, it was revolutionary. He called for an end to the war, slammed the systemic war crimes being committed, and reminded the world why he is and always will be the people's prince. If you're tired of the mainstream media trying to tear down a man who actually puts his life on the line for his values, you're in the right place. Let's break down how Harry just silenced his critics by doing what he does best. Leading with heart. The audacity of the man. Can we just talk about the security risk alone? Harry knows he's a target. He's been vocal about his security concerns, yet here he is, flying into a nation under constant bombardment. Why? Because for Harry, service isn't a buzzword you use to keep a taxpayer-funded lifestyle. It's a literal commitment. He opened his speech with a sense of clarity, and you can see it in his eyes. There's a specific kind of focus that comes over Harry when he's around soldiers and survivors. He told the audience in Kyiv that every time he returns, this being his 3rd visit, he feels a sense of what's at stake. The critics love to say he's distanced himself from his duty. Really? Because standing in a city that hears air raid sirens daily feels a lot more like duty than sitting in a drafty palace arguing over seating charts. Harry looked the people of Ukraine in the eye and said, "The world sees you and the world respects you." One of the most powerful moments of the speech was when Harry stripped away the titles. He told the forum, "I am not here as a politician. I am here as a soldier who understands service." Boom. Mic drop. This is what the firm back in London never understood. They tried to take away his honorary military titles, but they can't take away his experience. They can't take away the sand of Afghanistan or the bond he has with fellow veterans. Harry speaks a language that politicians don't know, the language of the front line. He warned the world not to grow numb to this war. It's been 5 years since the full-scale invasion, and a decade since the conflict began in 2014. Harry is calling out Ukraine fatigue. He's telling the West, don't you dare look away just because the news cycle moved on. He framed this conflict perfectly. It's not just about borders or dirt. It's a war about whether the word democracy actually means anything anymore. While his critics are worried about his Netflix deals, Harry is worried about the erosion of global freedom. Talk about perspective. Harry's speech took a fascinating turn when he talked about what modern leadership looks like. He didn't point to kings or queens. He pointed to the Ukrainian people. He praised their innovation, how they've developed world-leading drone capabilities and adapted faster than some of the largest armies on Earth. He called it leadership in real time. And this is where he subtly shaded the isolationist rhetoric we see in some parts of the world. Harry emphasized that strength isn't about being a tough guy or going it alone. He said true strength is unity. It's about nations standing together and carrying the burden as one. Does that sound like a man who wants to be isolated in California? No. It sounds like a man who understands that we are all connected. He's taking the global citizen approach that he and Meghan have championed, and he's applying it to the most dangerous geopolitical crisis of our time. We know that Harry and Meghan have made mental health their life's work. In Kyiv, Harry brought that expertise to the forefront. He spoke about the staggering human toll, but he looked beyond the physical wounds. He spoke about the trauma of the returnees, the psychological strain on families living under constant bombardment, the exhaustion of uncertainty. War is not only fought on the battlefield, Harry said. It is fought in the mind. He called out the psychological warfare designed to divide and erode hope. This is so relevant not just to Ukraine, but to what Harry and Meghan deal with every day. The disinformation, the fatigue, the constant attempts to break their spirit. Harry sees the parallel. He knows that if you can break a person's mind, you don't need to win on the battlefield. By highlighting this, he's giving a voice to the millions of Ukrainians suffering in silence. You can't talk about Harry in Ukraine without talking about the Invictus Games. This year marks 10 years of Ukraine's participation in the Games, and Harry was beaming with pride. He shared his experience visiting the Superhuman Centre in Lviv. For those who don't know, this centre is doing God's work, restoring bodies and lives for those who have lost limbs. Harry described it as proof that humanity can rebuild even in the darkest moments. This is the Harry the media refuses to show you. The one who spends his time with organisations like the Halo Trust, following in his mother's footsteps to clear landmines and World Central Kitchen. He's highlighting the people who are turning danger back into possibility. While the tabloids are reporting on what Meghan wore to lunch, Harry is reporting on the millions of meals being served to displaced families. The contrast in value is honestly laughable at this point. Now let's get into the heavy stuff. Harry didn't hold back. He addressed the systemic war crimes being documented. He talked about Bucha and Mariupol. He talked about the erasure of human dignity. But the most chilling part? When he spoke about the children. Harry highlighted the unlawful deportation of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children to Russia. He called it what it is, an act of genocide. He explained how these kids are being stripped of their identities, their language, and their culture. As a father himself, you could hear the pain in his voice. This isn't a royal visit. This is a moral crusade. And then he did it. He addressed President Putin directly. He said, "No nation benefits from the continued loss of life we are witnessing." He told the Russian leadership that there is still a moment to stop, that this path offers no victory, only more loss. Can you imagine the guts it takes to say that as a high-profile figure while standing on Ukrainian soil? The man has nerves of steel. Harry also dropped a history lesson that many people have forgotten. He brought up the Budapest Memorandum. Remember, Ukraine gave up the world's third-largest nuclear arsenal in exchange for guarantees of their sovereignty. Harry pointed out that those promises weren't just broken, they were discarded. He essentially put the international community on notice. He said that when commitments of this magnitude are violated, it destroys the credibility of every promise made between nations. He specifically called on the United States to show leadership. He reminded them that this isn't charity. It's about honoring a treaty and ensuring global stability. This is Harry using his platform to hold the powerful accountable. He's not just a celebrity in a war zone. He's a witness to history demanding justice. So why does this matter to us, the supporters of the Sussexes? It matters because it proves that everything the critics say is a lie. They say he's irrelevant. They say he's lost his way. Does this look like a man who has lost his way? He is standing where it matters, saying what needs to be said, and doing it with a level of grace and courage that is sorely lacking in modern discourse. Harry ended his speech with a challenge to all of us. He said the question is no longer whether Ukraine will stand. They've already proven they will. The question is, will the rest of the world match their resolve? He reminded us that history won't ask what we said. It will ask what we did. Who stepped forward? Who chose courage over caution? By going to Kyiv, Harry chose courage. He chose life and freedom over silence and delay. Prince Harry's visit to Kyiv is a masterclass in what it means to be a global leader in the 21st century. It's about being present, being honest, and being brave. He ended with a powerful Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, and the room erupted. The haters can keep their hashtags and their bitter columns. Harry will keep his boots on the ground and his heart with the people. What did you think of Harry's speech? Was it his most powerful one yet? Let me know in the comments, and keep it respectful. We are a pro-Sussex community here. We stand for truth and service. Before you go, if you want more deep dives into the real work Harry and Meghan are doing, the work the media tries to hide, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update on the Sussexes. We are growing this community of support every single day, and we need your voice. Like the video if you're proud of Prince Harry today. Share it to spread the truth. Until next time, stay focused on the good. Slava Ukraini, and peace out.